We welcome you to this first series of the AIF 2024 Bankability series. As you know, the AIF has an important mission to advance the bankability of deals across Africa. This is actually one of the strongest pillars of our mandate and where we find that the largest demand of our time lies. For this reason, we have decided to kickstart this bankability series by showcasing innovative ways in which various entities are approaching this crucial task as we seek to redirect global capital flows in Africa's direction. We're grateful to the speakers that will join us today and excited at the partnership that the AIF has been able to establish with them. We will hear today from a very active trust fund, the Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa, SEFA, which has brought 4 deals into the AIF pipeline as recently and is already making steadfast progress towards advancing their bankability. We'll also hear from Signum Capital, I hope I pronounced that right, an important private sector partner which happens to wear 2 hats, that of a financial advisor as well as a fund manager. And we wanted also to talk a little bit about the transition support facility that is domiciled in the African Development Bank, which from our work since 2020, we've managed to turn into a private sector focus. It's funded by the African Development Bank, and it's a facility set up in 2008 with the objective to deliver high quality and peace-positive interventions through national governments, regional institutions, communities, and other partners. Under the facility's third pillar, the TSF fund can be used to support targeted capacity building and technical assistance. What we have done on the AIF platform is to channel that not exclusively to the public sector, to government, but to the private sector, which we believe is the mainstay of any economic reform in the continent. And the AIF has partners with the TSF to support deal pipeline opportunities across of Africa in the transition states where we believe it's most needed. As a testament to this, and in the true transactional nature of the AIF, 10 out of the 37 boardrooms were TSF projects. Thus far, funds have been secured to support targeted bankability, and I'm hoping one of our speakers will speak to that later on in the day. According to this, its advanced bankability mandate, we have 3 such projects, and that's including an industrial park in Southern Africa. The AIF has also facilitated the provision of the TSF funding in favor of this project and has recruited the services of experts, financial advisors, as I mentioned earlier, to tell us how they can move in an innovative manner to ensure that the support is channeled to where it is needed. This is the power of the platform and the strong spirit of the partnership that characterizes the AIF. I'm happy to welcome you to this exciting session and hope that you understand that what we're doing here is not just about talk. We will leave with positive approaches to actual transactions. Thank you very much and welcome once again.
I think we should all recognize that the notion of what does it take to make a transaction or a project bankable is somewhat of a fuzzy concept as well, can be quite broadly defined. What are the kinds of issues that are holding opportunities back? So we'll go into a little bit of what that means as well with our speakers. So the aim of the Africa Investment Forum's Investment Roundtable series is to share evolutions on the frontier of these kinds of challenges as part of their own mandate to convene actors to help accelerate transactions to close. And so we hope this is the beginning of a series of these kinds of discussions that build upon each other. So we often hear that there's an important role for development finance actors, as well as those from the private sector or fund managers, or those who are administering project preparation funds to do a lot in this space. There is a role for innovative use of development finance, especially at smaller ticket sizes, earlier stage. And the questions are, how can those kinds of actors play that kind of a role? And we look at a very fragmented landscape with a lot of different actors in terms of project preparation funds and other instruments. And there's a question around how do we bring the best of that together? So today is a great opportunity for us to hear from both of those constituents. Our first speaker is Chris Candier, the Executive Director of Signum Capital. Signum is an investment banking and asset management firm focused on frontier economies, including in Africa. Through their asset management activities, they manage a range of funds targeting early stage or challenging geographies, and they also operate project preparation funds and can share views across both of those dimensions.
As Ali Khan has mentioned, my name is Chris Kandie. I work with Signum Capital. So when we got invited to present at this particular roundtable, I think the way we wanted to come towards this subject of bankability is through a more project preparation, development approach or perspective. And then, and that's sort of the heart of what we're going to present today. But over and above that, what also kind of makes our perspective slightly unique is the fact that on one part, Signum Capital is an investor, and on the other part, Signum Capital acts as an advisor. So we kind of get to, in one shape or form, sit on sort of both sides of the table, depending on which part of our business is participating within a project, and then and we get to sort of appreciate how bankability is viewed from the perspective of the sponsor or the perspective of the investor. And I think that is a very sort of critical perspective, or unique perspective for that matter, that we bring to this. So if we sort of go to the next slide, this is a bit about us, and not sort of shamelessly plug ourselves, but it's sort of important to understand who we are and how we sort of approach bankability. So the top part of what you're seeing there is more of our work within the advisory space, which, we do have a corporate investment banking business, a development finance business, and a sovereign finance business. And through all this, we've sort of come across quite a number of project preparation, project development opportunities from the perspective of mobilizing funding for that, as well as being drivers of transactions, as transaction advisors, financial advisors. On the asset management side, I think that is where we also get to see things from the investor's perspective and view it from sort of the critical, with a critical eye of an investor. And primarily as lenders, because we have about $835 million that we're managing, and a huge chunk of that is as lenders. One of the funds we have is a local currency bond fund, which again interacts quite a bit with the capital markets, looks at transactions that are pretty baked, that come to the market, that's the capital markets all across Africa, and deploys in local currency as it were. We have two other funds, that's the on-grid and the Facility for Energy Inclusion, that's FAI. And we were just joking earlier with Ali Khan as well as Joao, that's something that ties all of us. On one part, Ali Khan was involved in structuring it. We are the fund manager, and Sefa through Joao is an investor. I'll touch a bit more about how we approach project development and from the perspective of our funds in subsequent slides. But other than that, we also have a green fund, Africa Go Green, as well as a venture capital fund, which we also works on the low carbon economy. Again, sector-wise, as you can imagine, we're very big in the key sectors that you'd see that are important within Africa, and that's including energy, infra, housing, manufacturing, you name it, we probably have done something within that subsector in Africa. So moving on to the next slide. That sort of talks through what we do within the development finance space. But here is where I probably touch on what the senior director mentioned, and in connection with what we've sort of done before with AIF. And that's, of course, supporting through the TSF, that's a Transition Support Facility project that, if you viewed it from the start, had interest from lenders, but for one reason or another, just didn't get to go through. And this is what is at the heart of bankability, really going at the heart of developing a project so that it's ready to be taken forward and actually raise financing. And with this project, which one has a credible sponsor, is ready to go, it has a great, expansion story. For one reason or another, it did not necessarily attract, serious lender interest. Lenders are hovering around, but they're not necessarily diving into it. And through this facility and the support that we're providing through AIF, we've been able to sort of help the project sponsor along the way. And right now we're in the process of raising capital. And the story quickly shifts when you have a cohesive story, a well-developed project that's in front of sponsors, and really drives the interest to take it to financial close. So I won't spend too much time here on what we do, but again, as you can tell, we've worked with quite a number of partners across the development space. No need to go into too much depth into that. So the next slide that we have really focuses quite a lot on what we see as, one, the infrastructure challenge that we face as Africa, and then a bit later we touch on what we see as the sort of the project development issues that we see within Africa. So I'm sure you've seen these numbers in one shape or form. These are AFDB's numbers. On one part, these are big infrastructure challenges that we face as Africa, massive gap, and bottom line, we are more or less halfway there in terms of availability of funding. So in a sense, there's still quite a bit of gap for funding to be raised. But the deeper you go into it, a lot of these funding issues are further exacerbated by the fact that we're facing climate-related challenges, shocks, all across Africa. And myself, being a Kenyan, this year was quite a surprise for me because we hardly ever face, we are famously known for our great weather. So, but this year we're seeing things we've never seen before. Like flooding in the city, and this just goes. I had to tell you that in previously goes to show you the effects of climate change, and the more you go deeper into this, the further it is to us that the clearer it is to us that, of course, other than just developing infrastructure, it has to be resilient. It has to be climate resilient, and that's a very big part of ensuring what we develop from a product development stage all the way just doesn't go to answer a bankability question in sort of the traditional sense or definition, but has to go over and above that to offer a more sort of climate resilient solution other than what would have been expected in the past. So the next slide we have sort of talks through what we see as specific project development, project preparation challenges. So one of the things which we have seen through our advisory business as well as investors is within the project development space, you don't find quite what you'd consider long-term financial support. And here we're talking about donors who, sort of dedicated and are backing project preparation, project development over the long run. You have one-off grants which sort of support these project development facilities, but it doesn't necessarily take them all the way and over the long term. Again, there is also a big issue around inaccessibility and a lack of focus. So inaccessibility sort of takes a view that on one part, there are different pots of money that are sort of spread all over within the development finance landscape. But when you speak to project sponsors, there isn't a very clear view on what works for me. So I'll probably, as a project sponsor, come, facing project development challenges. I don't know where I can get money for, my environmental study or for a financial advisor. These pots of money are sort of split all over, and probably are not necessarily as clearly articulated in terms of the opportunity they present to potential sponsored developers. And this is something which naturally, this being AIF, I see the clear sort of role of them as a facilitator to sort of connect the parties and make it clearer to them where they see, sort of potential pots of funding that they could utilize to develop projects. Again, there are issues around scale, and scale, speak to one, the fact that Africa requires a lot of funding, and then the project preparation facilities or development facilities might not necessarily have the critical mass to support larger projects. We've talked about speed, basically the bureaucratic process that somebody has to go to access project preparation development funding. Within the development, within the PPDFs themselves, there are challenges from managing their portfolios, and there are also, human capital constraints. So, after talking through all these challenges, what sort of innovation is there, and what have we done within Signum as a project, as an investor? Next slide, please. So within Signum, as I mentioned, we have a couple of funds, and what we've tried to do as part of our structuring process is, on one part, develop, well-capitalized vehicles with, coherent capital structures, and that goes towards, one, getting, your different tranches of capital well-stacked that actually attract more investment within that. But we also recognize the fact that project development and support is required, even with really experienced project sponsors. So at times, what happens is we try to ensure that we embed within the fund structures that we have an element of technical assistance or project development preparation funding that allows, potential investees to get across the line. So so right now we have close to about 20 million in across all our funds to support potential investees to get deals across the line. And this really helps. So sometimes, given the sort of the investment policies and the strict nature within which we have to adhere within what we've promised our investors, we need to make sure that, for instance, a potential investee comes to us, they don't have a proper environmental study, they probably don't have a proper legal structure, they probably don't have enough funding to get a proper financial advisor to structure the deals. We can provide that facility, and that sort of shortens the road they have to take, which might mean going out there trying to source for different pots of funding to cover this last mile project development requirements, which we could potentially offer either as a reimbursable grant that we come and or a pure grant and come and recover it at the point when funding flows. And for us, we cover quite a number of areas, as you can see, from transaction support, to deal execution. So, for instance, like our bond fund is happy to pay for, sort of a local advisor to help you structure the bond properly, so that by the time it comes to market, we can come in and potentially anchor the investment. There's a lot of work on project preparation, and there is where you have your ENS studies, your legal due diligence, your other technical due diligence work that you would probably require to get the funding across the line. So there are many other things which we also cover: capacity building, knowledge tools, product development, for that matter. So our point here is being very transactional. We try to cover what one would consider sort of your last mile requirements, and with that sort of sort of investment, you have you're able to get to the end and get to financial close much faster than one would traditionally have to go through. So that's us in terms of what we do within the project preparation space. When it comes to what we've done before, from not just as an investor, but also as a as an advisor, next slide please, we've sort of taken advantage of what we see within the AIF ecosystem. Maybe you could put on the next slide. Yeah. Sorry. Next slide, please. Yes. So on this particular slide, we talk through what we've done, or what we've done with, especially with AIF. So I was part of a team that worked on this. We helped structure an affordable housing fund focused on Kenya. And some of the bankability things or issues that we covered really centered, one, on structure. So we made sure from a structural perspective to attract other investors, have a sort of a concessional layer of equity that came in and attracted or crowded in an additional layer of commercial equity. So we worked with FSDAI, that's that's a UK-backed entity that came in, provided concessional equity. And then over and above that, structurally, we try to make sure that we're not on one part just looking at having a Kenyan domicile. We also had an offshore domicile, equal rights with Kenyan investors that provided comfort for other people for other investors who would not normally, for instance, invest within a Kenyan domicile, access the same investment within equal terms. So this, in a sense, provides deals with the legal issues or legal structuring issues, which you mentioned, enhancing bankability, and then capital structuring issues, which also enhance bankability. Over and above that, worth mentioning, we featured this deal within the AIF Market Day back in 2019. As we all know, immediately after that, COVID happened. So it took us a while to get to financial close. But all said and done, that is the path which we had to take to ensure that the deal is ready and investable and has a sort of level of focus as well as profile to attract the investors that came in. So bottom line, we raised close to $85 million, which and the fund is now deploying and fairly aligned with what's happening within the country, focus on affordable housing and whatnot. And that's more or less what we see from a bankability perspective, and the effect which well-prepared deals can come with the right support and get the right kind of interest from investors. I think that's pretty much it from my perspective. Very happy to take any questions.
And what you've just discussed is actually a real problem we see all the time when we're screening deals. But this is the beauty of the AIF. I'm not sure there's any deal that comes to our portfolio that we discard. It's just some of them just take a little bit more work than others. And we understand that everybody has a different nuance to it. You just talked about the government. Their deals are not necessarily based on returns. And sometimes they do need to have a social impact, which we look at when we screen deals. Some of the deals that may not have made it out of into our boardrooms actually do because of that particular social impact. But our job is to make deals bankable wherever they come from. And 90% of the time what we find is that it lies in the structuring. And the fact that it's a government deal and doesn't necessarily have a focus on returns is also something we're pushing back on the AIF platform, because you should be looking at it for returns, if the fact that's a government deal. But what we do is to structure it, and this is where the development bank comes in, because they then take that first, what we say constantly is that it's a relay race. And whoever starts the race doesn't necessarily have to finish it. But we have to have all of the participants on the table at the same time, so they understand where they have to fit in, what they have to do, and why they have to insist on ensuring that these projects are bankable. Because what we find, and when people are trying to say, oh, it's a government project, we're trying to help the people, is that they walk away from the profitability inside it, which they shouldn't, because it exists. And our job as the AIF is to prune all of the excesses that make it unprofitable, so that there's a win-win situation. And we constantly marry both the private sector and the government sector for the purpose of the continent.
So my comment is maybe that I would appreciate also with our background that we are really a DFI that finances when a deal is bankable. I certainly appreciate the groundwork that is done until the likes of us can become active. But bankability as such doesn't matter whether in the end we finance or a local commercial bank, as long as a company is bankable, that's already a major achievement. What I try to say is, since we're not so much involved in the upstream, I would appreciate a clearer distinction maybe between infrastructure deals and corporate companies, because they both have various requirements, different requirements in project preparation or the upstream support they need. That's maybe one thing that didn't come out very clearly, because by nature, infra and corporate companies are either also greenfield or expansion projects. Greenfield is different to expansions. Infrastructure is very different in project preparation to supporting corporate companies. Takes much more time in infra, requires much more money. But that's a side comment, which I would love to see. Maybe my question is, after that, is how, with the facilities you've mentioned, we can ensure that the companies that are onboarded into the AIF process can really get the technical assistance support they require, be it corporate companies in particular, to make sure that maybe out of all the circles we're talking about and the DFIs that all have various pots of money can maybe link it through the AIF to bring this kind of much needed support to the companies you are working with under the AIF framework. Because we would love to, of course, be of support and see how we can work with you. Thank you.
On the public versus private, I think after seeing so many projects across the continent over a decade, I think the reality is that most projects are effectively PPPs, right? You need the government to play, you need the private sector to play. It's where you draw the balance that is the art of the deal. And increasingly, our advisory is agnostic on where you draw that line, but we need to make sure that we bring all the parties together. So in some cases, for example, there's one specific project that we supported in Guinea-Bissau originally as an IPP, a hydropower project that was going to be sort of tendered to the private sector. The project has evolved through various stages. Eventually, it got structured as a public sector project. But the support were there, the studies were there, the advice was there. The project is now entering the bank's sovereign pipeline, and yeah, it mutated over time. On the profit versus impact, I think the first issue is that the project has to be bankable, right? If the project is not bankable, it won't happen. If the project doesn't happen, there's no impact, right? So we still need to make sure that the basic elements for commercial viability are there. And we need to make sure that all the ingredients are there to bring the project to fruition. Obviously, returns and profitability is a key consideration for investors. We have a problem in Africa, which is high cost of capital. And this is where development finance institutions can really add value. This is where the Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa these days is adding value, is really sort of blending and lowering the cost of capital so you can bridge that gap between, what are the return expectations of investors and how to sort of really achieve the development impact and that are sort of ultimately what we want. Thank you.
I think the distinction you're making, I think you made a very salient point that, it's not a project has to be bankable. Whether you spend more time because it's an infrastructure project or a corporate project, the job of the AIF and what we're trying to put on the table is that no matter how long it takes, we're going to have to make it bankable, be it infrastructure, be it corporate. And part of the reason why we're here today as well is to think through innovative ways of utilizing the tools already on ground, because there's a plethora of them, which is why we have both the Signum here and SAFER here, and then of course the utilization of a TSF fund that is already within the system. So it's to identify, I think you mentioned that in your slide, to identify the ports which are already in existence and how to then make them malleable enough to appeal to any of the pillars you may have, whether it's infrastructure or not. And then the second question, there was a question to the, sorry.
I think you partly.
No, but
partly
yes, and
answered
that is
was
the.
how to ensure in the process of the AIF once the
Yes,
company is
that's
onboarded
the
into the process.
absolutely.
Yes, both infra but also corporate companies that there are tools, I believe, and.
Yeah, because on the onboarding of the AIF, and that's why you know, without it being said, that the AIF is the flagship initiative of the African Development Bank, and it is in the bid to catalyze investment into the continent that it was set up. And we have founding partners, I see a lot of them in the room today with us, who the job of the AIF is to shop. And so necessarily when you bring a deal to the AIF platform, it doesn't necessarily have to be an ADB-backed deal. It might be better off done with Africa 50 or Afrexim or the AFC. And that's our job, to push it where we find that it will be moved most speedily and most responsive to the ask that has brought it to the AIF platform. So that's what we work on. Thank you.
As it says in the slide, it's a holistic approach, and I'll explain that in a second. But that we just don't focus on the projects or the project preparation. We look at the sort of the upstream enabling environment. We look at working with the public sector to also develop a bankable program, bankable transactions, but then we work with the private sector in bringing those projects to bankability, and then we look at the financing. So actually CEFA was originally set up as a project preparation facility. In its first life, which ran between 2012 and 2019, we were basically doing project preparation grants to individual projects, one here, one there, small money here, small money there, with a view to bring projects to bankability and then to bring the African Development Bank as an investor or co-investor alongside the other financiers, and to really prove that renewable energy can deliver for Africa, and to prove that we can do so with private capital and private investors. It started as a bilateral cooperation fund with one donor, $50 million. We're now past the $500 million mark with 10 donors. So it shows that there is interest and appetite from the donor community to really support early stage finance, catalytic finance, to bring more projects and more initiatives to bankability. Our focal areas at the moment are threefold. They basically cover the entire spectrum of the energy space. The first one is green baseload, is really about increasing the penetration of renewable energy power generation infrastructure and to displace fossil fuels from the grid. This is where we work very closely with our project finance teams in moving solar projects, wind projects, hydropower projects, geothermal, so on and so forth. Then we have two other pieces to our strategy. One is on mini-grids. This is about energy access. This is about rural electrification, but using or leveraging private capital and really pushing innovative business models to really deliver for underserved rural areas that will probably be waiting a long time for the utilities to bring the grid. This is an area where we tend to be more activist, where we drive the business ourselves. It's not something that the bank has appetite yet to invest. These are smaller projects, these are riskier, but we're there to really sort of try to prove the business models and show that these can be bankable with the right configurations, with the right partners, and with the right blend of financing. Then energy efficiency is really looking into emerging business models, more on the demand side, more on the consumption side. So we're increasingly looking to clean cooking and increasingly looking to electric mobility, solar irrigation. So there's a number of very funky, innovative, small-scale business models that we're trying to accelerate as well through our interventions. The scope of CEFA is very much threefold, and as I was mentioning earlier, and that's the sort of the holistic approach: upstream support, closing viability gaps, and de-risking investors. And we do that through quite an extensive toolbox of catalytic financing instruments, both on the technical assistance side and on the concessional investment side. On the technical assistance, we work both with public sector entities as well with private sector entities. We do pure grants for activities that are non-commercial or very upstream. We do reimbursable grants for project preparation where there is prospects of the project reaching financial close within a sort of a reasonable time frame, and then we can recover that kind of a risk capital. And some of the examples include investment program design, working with governments, for example, to design mini-grid scale-up programs. That's one good example. Or battery storage programs, and we're working on a few at the moment. Or even scale-up of solar. And we've seen IFC doing their scaling solar program. We have a different brand of our scaling solar, but we're working as well because this is something that is amenable to standardization, to packaging, and to tendering out to the private sector. But then that's not enough. I think this is one thing that we've learned over the years. It's all good to do upstream work, but the world is not that simple. And it's ever evolving, and we saw that through COVID. There was a big crisis in the market, and it's been sort of waves since then that are disrupting the markets, and we thought would be bankable, 5-6 years ago. Now we would struggle to find investors. So our second window, concessional investments, which was added in 2020, came in at the right time. We provide different types of instruments, from investment grants or results-based finance to concessional loans that could be subordinated or senior secured, to junior equity into funds and platforms. And we usually target the more innovative types of projects, the more innovative types of funding platforms, and really help them catalyze investors. Again, our holistic approach, as I was mentioning earlier, TA programs, preparation and capitalization of groundbreaking commercial funds and investment platforms, and closing the viability gaps at project level. Again, even if the project is well prepared and we think it's bankable, once you start raising the financing, you will see that the world will probably have changed, and you may have to sort of come in with additional instruments to really sort of close the gap between, for example, into the return expectations of investors that we were talking earlier versus the impact, and try to get that balance right. And that's the sort of the right sort of instruments. Just a fun fact is that in our sort of 12-year sort of history, we've deployed already $300 million in capital, and about 30% of that has gone into early stage, different types of project preparation and program design. So we're very much active in really moving the pipeline in the African continent. So where does AIF come in? And I think this is where I wanted to get at, all right? So all this work that we're doing is extremely interesting. I would say it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. Raising capital is extremely hard, and it's not getting any easier, right? And especially when you're pushing the boundaries of renewable energy, when you're pushing the boundaries of energy access, new business models, new fund platforms, investment funds, so on and so forth, you really need to find ways to consult the market and to bring in and onboard investors. And I would say that our experience with AIF so far has been fairly positive. Obviously, there is room for improvement. We're both learning how to work with each other, but we can report some good success stories. We have, I would say that circa just about $1 billion has been pitched across actually 6 transactions. That's the wrong number. Mainly funds and platforms at AIF since 2018. And we've found it as a very useful platform to showcase some of our deals, some of our investments, but also to learn more about other projects that may be out in the market looking for an early stage investor. The value addition, I would say it's threefold. First, it's market sounding, is coming to AIF to really understand if some of these propositions are interesting for the community. And that we may get excited about it and think this is a fantastic idea, but we don't know. And we have the odd bilateral conversations, but having a roundtable with investors is a great sort of market sounding platform. Investor outreach, and we normally talk to other DFIs, but the investment community goes far beyond the DFIs. There's a number of impact investors, commercial investors, institutional investors out in the market, and we may fail to reach them all, but through AIF we've been able to actually socialize and introduce some non-traditional investors to some of our investment opportunities, and that's been quite interesting to see some of these conversations unfolding. Last but not least, it's a way for us to really understand this elusive concept of bankability, right? It means different things to different people at different times, and this platform allows us to have that conversation and to understand, is this bankable? Is the development phase close to conclusion? Do we need to do more studies? The capital structure, does it make sense? Do we need more concessional, more junior? So it's a way for us to really sort of understand what still needs to be done to bring the projects to close. I'll just run very quickly through some projects or some initiatives that have been funded, have been pitched at AIF. I think the first one has been mentioned here and connects us all, including Fernando, who was the first investment officer for FEI at the time. We all aligned, if you remember. CEFA came in with a project preparation grant to fund the studies. Dahlberg at the time did the market studies and the structuring exercise. And then eventually we went to markets to recruit Lion's Head, now Signum Capital, to manage this fund. All good, but you still need to raise capital. And the ambition at the time was to raise $500 million into the first sort of Pan-African debt finance platform for small-scale renewables. There was a clear gap in the market for the small-scale projects. The bank could not go there. So we brought this to the first AIF. And it was a very fruitful discussion. There was primarily DFIs around the table, but even DFIs were trying to get comfortable with it, trying to understand the proposition. They gave us a lot of good feedback, and I think a lot of that feedback filtered through into the structuring. I think one of the key messages was we need downside protection, we need junior equity, we need more catalytic financing to the structure. We're not going to make money, and we're taking a lot of risk on this initiative. But in the end, we were able to mobilize significant junior capital and raise investment or capital from a number of DFIs and some private investors. And the story goes on. This is another fund that was pitched in 2019, the first clean cooking ecosystem fund. I think clean cooking now has become sexy, and everyone is talking about it. And there's a number of interesting businesses that are thriving, but at the time, there's hardly any sort of equity going into this space, and the business was very small. We co-sponsored this facility, this fund. Came to AIF, and there were a number of good conversations, and we were able to progress, and the fund is now operating. Now this is a project, and this is quite I'll call it a funky chicken project. It's a wave energy powered system to desalinize water in Cabo Verde. So Cape Verde is a water stressed country. Water is very expensive. They use diesel gensets to desalinize. There was this sponsor that had a very brilliant idea to use the wave resource in the country to desalinize, to sort of generate power and desalinize water. This is a technology that was initially even developed with the support of the US military. So you can see that there is keen interest for these kinds of technologies, and it has potential in Africa because there's a long coast and there's various water-stressed countries, and water supply is an issue. This was pitched at AIF. We got interesting feedback from the investors. There was appetite, but they wanted to see the first commercial deployment. We came in with a CEFA TA grant for the additional feasibility work and tried to really get them across the line with the first commercial pilot. Unfortunately, the studies were not very positive. The resource was actually not very good, although you see a lot of waves there, but not enough waves to power the system. And the project is now reinventing itself. Maybe it's got to go solar, we don't know. But anyway, AIF was there to sort of point us in a certain direction and help us sort of move the project along through bankability. Anyway, I have a few more examples. RF, cross-boundary, this was last year. We pitched, this is the first mini-grid financing platform. Again, it funds mini-grid portfolios. We cannot invest, or we're not in a position to invest in small mini-grid projects. We believe that the best approach is to take a platform approach and have a dedicated sort of investor to really manage the origination and the construction of these assets. This is now in the market. It's raising. It got a lot of attention last year at AIF. We have invested in the meantime, and we understand that IFC is now getting ready to invest in this platform as well. I hope that African Development Bank can also come in on the senior equity tranche. And this is a VC fund, Kawi Safi, also in the energy access, energy efficiency space. Similar story. AIF provides the platform. Here, there was an interesting twist. There were a number of Japanese investors in the room. They took a very keen interest in these funds, and immediately after AIF, the fund manager was in a plane to Japan to sit down with some of these investors. I understand now at least one of them will be investing in these funds, and we're happy that this happened. We're happy as well that we're providing the junior capital that is providing the de-risking and anchoring sort of more commercially minded investors. I think that's enough examples for today, but I think you get the drift, and happy to take more questions. Thank you so much.
My name is Chisom Okoli. I'm a senior associate at Udo, Doma and Bello Sage in Nigerian law firm. I work on project development deals. So my question is to the panelists. So from my experience working on project development deals, there are some deals that you work on, and it's some of the equipment required for those deals and technical support, you would have to get that from offshore, and that would mean that the project developers would need financing in foreign currency. Now, beyond taking out hedging instruments or currency swap, what options do you think, other options do you think project developers or financiers within trying to finance projects within territories or countries that have volatile currency like Nigeria should explore to mitigate currency risks and improve bankability for the projects?
My name is Demola Aladekomo, the chairman of Smart City PLC. I'm from Nigeria. We take an approach that is unusual to real estate development. For a place like Lagos, Ibadan, or Nairobi, instead of rejuvenating it, we say, why don't you build brand new cities, polycentric cities, agglomerated, specialized, that means specialized polycentric cities to mega cities. And that's what we've been trying to do. We have 2 cities like that coming up in Nigeria, in the southwestern part of Nigeria. We wanted to start from Lagos, but the Lagos state government and the land issues. But in 2 other states, we were able to do a PPP, get land from government, and then we are now building the new cities. As an aside, when I met my wife, she was so lovely, I retired encyclopedia because there was no need for a search.
Sorry, may I just ask, can you just let us know what the
AIF,
question is, though, please, if I may
meeting
ask.
AIF, I like to retire Google because project preparation and bankability had been a major issue. When you approach bankers or the PwC, the KPMGs, their approach have always been to go through feasibility studies, business plan, and then you now get to the financiers. It now becomes a major issue. So this forum, this particular session, has been a major eye-opener. Now, 2 questions. How crazy can an idea be for you to look at it? Because saying that you are building new cities or you are building a data center that is going to cost you about $800 million, we sound crazy to a regular banker. But there's a need, and you know that the market needs this kind of project. So how crazy will the project be for you to want to consider it?
That? So I think we have 2 questions here. The first one is around how do we, from our first audience member, how do we think about managing FX risk when we're looking at some of these early stage projects, especially around things such as needing to purchase equipment. I wonder whether either of our panelists who are at the front, coalface of this, have any perspectives on that.
Yep. So thank you. I mean, that's, if there was such a question as $1 million question, that is one of those. And the reality, especially, specifically around Nigeria, is it's not as, I mean, what's been happening in the recent past, with the volatility, with the exchange rate. And that, of course, is not necessarily, confidence building, especially even within, from a hedging, perspective. So somebody's coming in, trying to take the risk of hedging, local currency. There is definite caution, and rightly so, because it's a fairly volatile environment. So if you were to ask this question when things are more stable, I'd give you the textbook answer, go to a hedging provider, and they would, be able to give you, downside protection, and you'll be able to get the FX you need to import. But that said, I think, that's not to say, of course, that the market is not there. You definitely can source for FX, but it's not as easy. But all the more reason that on one part there's need to develop deeper sort of local currency solutions where possible, and not necessarily be as dependent on FX for that matter. But fully understand your question. My apologies for not so full answer, but it's the environment that we're in. Yeah.
Just in addition to that, and again, this is a situation that we're faced with almost on a daily basis on the platform. We're also very carefully looking at domestic resource mobilization to sort of prefer this assistance needed in the currency that it is needed in. And that is speaking to those people who are providers in them, because there's what you just said, we're looking for funds to come in from outside. Well, that's what's typically been done. But what we are doing on the platform, and recently we've just closed a deal ask on one of our projects, and we were very keen on the funding being in the local currency so that repayment will be easier for them. And these are the kind of things we're looking at, just so that it's not always a one-prong approach. It's different, and you must be nimble enough to react to the situation around you, which in the case of Nigeria now, it's been some up and down currency fluctuation. So it's focusing largely on domestic resource mobilization. And of course, in the larger how do we mitigate against this excessive dependence on imports of whatever it is that is needed? So that's it. Thank you. The second question.
Yeah, I might even take the liberty of just framing that question in a way that, one way is like how lateral or extreme might the opportunities you look at be. Maybe the other way of looking at it is also like, what are the absolute boundaries of what we might consider as opportunities that could come either through AIF more generally, or when Signum Capital is looking at opportunities, or when SEPA is thinking about either new fund or vehicle concepts. Any immediate reflections on that?
We get pitched crazy ideas all the time, and we like to be exposed to new thinking and be challenged. But obviously, the first question is, can you execute? Can you deliver, right? And a lot of the developers pitching these ideas, they fail that test. They may not have the experience or the requisite experience or track record, or they may simply not have the funding. And even if you provide a sliver of funding, because if you want to build a ski city from scratch, $1 million is not going to take you very far. Maybe help you with some studies, but that's just the beginning of a long journey. And we need to understand that you have what it takes for that long journey until your project, your vision becomes a reality. And I think that's the main question. But we do find every now and then, we do find some very, very resilient entrepreneurs that are ready to listen and be guided and take direction from early stage investors, and they're able to find their way. So we're able to partner them with an organization that helps them develop the business plan. We're help partner with a VC fund that can bring some early stage financing, or a strategic partner that may be aligned with that same vision and may have the experience and expertise and some additional capital, while you have the local knowledge, while you have the local networks, while you can open doors to make the project sort of progress with national institutions. So it is a process, it is a conversation, but you absolutely need to demonstrate that you can deliver. I think that's, otherwise we're all wasting our time. Thank you.
In addition to what he said, there was something key that he put on the table that we focus on very clearly on the Africa Investment Forum platform. Is the project sponsor willing to be guided? Because what we see is that people come to us with a lot of concepts. This is their idea. We do the structuring, telling you what will get you to where you want to go. And the successes that we record are those who are willing to drop their idea of what they think they want to do and focus very clearly on how to get to where they need to do. The question he raised about, is it bankable? Do you have what it takes? The job we do at AIF is to help you have what it takes, because we're interested in that project. But that's after we have determined that the impact that it will have in the long run when it's built. Typically, I am insisting that the basic thing for success on the AIF platform is the willingness of the project sponsor to accept the structuring that is required to meet their ask. Thank you.
My name is Austin Ijere. I'm from Nigeria, working with KKK Nigeria. Please, I'm here just to commend the IMF, the AIF, for the job being done so far. Really, what the senior director said today concerning bridging the gap between the businessmen, entrepreneurs, and the development institutions, which is very good. A lot of people are in a hopeless situation in terms of their business, how to get it from the beginning to the end. And what I can get out here today is the platform is good. It's encouraging business people not to give up. So I'm here to say, please carry on the good job. It's something exciting, and some of us here today who are here to hear the beautiful story, we're going to take it back home and take it to all our clients and our business friends that AIF is doing a great job. You can also don't give up in your hope. They can help you get it to the end. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank you for those remarks, but would ask any other general remarks that we can maybe keep to the very end, but any questions?
List with African business. My question is for AIF. What has been the biggest impediment to faster deal making that you have noted, and what strategies do you have in place to address this problem? Thanks.
First of all, let me start with what the AIF's objective is, which is to, first of all, to prepare both projects for bankability, to facilitate the raising of capital, and then to increase the speed with which it's done. We have a big challenge in bureaucracy, which sometimes doesn't take into cognizance the very nature of the entrepreneurial spirit, the private sector. We talk about feasibility studies, and you spend hours, years, months doing feasibility studies, and then it takes another maybe double that time to get the financing, at which time those feasibility studies may have become obsolete, so you have to start again. So what we're looking at is, how do we make that not be the case? That's one of the biggest challenges we have. How do we move aside from bureaucracy? How do we unlock the bottlenecks which exist? And sometimes these bottlenecks have nothing to do with financing. It may be a political bottleneck. It may be an environmental bottleneck, a social bottleneck, or even a behavioral bottleneck. And these are the challenges that we see, but how you mitigate them is, first of all, admitting that one size doesn't fit all. And you have to take each project for its sake and tackle the problems that and then look for alternative ways. What we find a lot is that this is a proven record. This is what we've always done, and people are prepared to follow that to the end. And sometimes by deterring a bit, like we've done with the TSF, you are able to provide succor to many of the projects, because our aim is to ensure that many of these projects are actually developed and working on the continent. Thank you.
Thank you. We maybe have time for one final question if there is one.
Thank you immensely for the opportunity. My name is Boris Ngala. I'm the founder of BB Incubator. I'm a Cameroonian. My question is directed to, I'll relate it to what President Ruto said today in the case of the went to the market, and after everything, the country was relegated because of a particular country, another country that is not even a neighboring country, meaning that even as we look up to investors, you've already done your visibility studies, you've done everything, and there are some red, or I don't know, maybe there are some red zones for investment or some sort of thing. How does AIF mitigate that, so to speak? Because, for instance, like where I come from, I'm running a project where we have created over 300 businesses right now, and we're looking at creating 1,500 businesses, successful businesses in the next 5 years. And we want to ensure that these businesses become sustainable. But as the incubator, we can't do this alone. We need, partners and collaborators that will bring this to the limelight. And we also have projects, tech projects for health, for education, and stuff like this. But how do you, because I know clearly that when someone hears about Cameroon, they're surprised. Cameroon is nowhere, but we're trying to bring this up and put it on the limelight. How do you take off a country from the red zone for investment, so to speak? Thank you.
First of all, you need to come on the platform, because we can't provide this advice in the air, because we need to look at this project. We need to look at what it is you're doing and look at it, why it's not moving, what it is we need to do, and that's by bringing it. Because when we say bring it to the platform, you do have to be onboarded in the platform in a very formal process. And once that happens, then you have a preparatory conversation with our team so that we understand, because every ask is different. We keep saying to you, you've just said, how do you move it from the red zone? But moving, it's not one singular project. It's a collective approach to the project. So we need to see what you have. And I encourage you to, there's an email address you can send and then start the initial conversation. And then that's just from the AIF platform side. But even from the DFI angle and how the work with that, the pathway is very clear. What we can do is to assist you to get to the where you need to be faster, where the AIF is primarily a facilitator.
Before I allow the Senior Director just to thank and close the discussion today, maybe just wanted to share 2 or 3 quick observations of things that particularly struck me over the course of the discussion that we've just had. I thought with the presentation from Signum Capital, it's quite interesting to see their diagnosis of the project preparation fund market from their perspective, having a lot of fragmentation, a lot of those funds subscale, real need to be able to pull in a lot of different kinds of capabilities. Now, the Africa Investment Forum is not a project preparation facility, but one of its great roles is being that connector and being a platform to bring multiple actors together in a coherent way to bring conversations forward, and then by identifying some of the challenges around bankability, better allowing the kind of the route matching between what's needed and then who can provide the ability to address those gaps. So one of the roles that the AIF is also able to play in this environment where we do have that fragmentation is to, if you like, defragment it by acting as a connector across that. It was also great to hear from Sefa around the ability to bring concepts to the table at AIF, to be able to get some market sounding around those concepts, as well as move through to the capital raising type discussions as well. So really helpful to be able to bring those kinds of concepts together. I thought some of the questions that we had were really, really illuminating as well. Obviously, FX is a challenge. We haven't yet bottomed that out. And I note that there's a number of us in the room from that part of the world that know that firsthand. But I think that's still a conversation to keep going through. But I think one of the things that came out through a lot of the questions is that we can't just take a generalistic answer to deals. And in fact, I think we heard this is the senior director say a few different times that there's a lot of heterogeneity. Every opportunity has its challenges, but by bringing them to the forum, we're able to look at what are the specific things that will unlock that deal. And so to look at each one on its own basis and look at what the unlocks are. So thank you so much for the discussion. I'd just like to hand over to the Senior Director just for any final remarks.
Please, a round of applause for our moderator. I believe he himself embodies the AIF ethos, which is connecting various different arenas in various different formats. And I thank him very much for his time. And we've been able to do a lot of work across the period with him. And the professionalism and dedication to the continent is paramount to know. So thank you very much, Ali. And then so thanking Signum very much for he's been here on a short notice, and then also having in different hats worked for the projects across the continent, and that focus and making things happen when it looks as if it can't. And again, with the work that they're going to currently embark on that connectivity between the TSF funding in its public sector GAB, putting it directly to work in a private sector capacity. Thank you very much for that. And then my last but certainly not the least is Sefa, who has demonstrated more than anyone else the ability of the AIF and the synergy that can exist in projects. And they have been at it for a long time. And what Sefa tells us is that you just keep at something, whether it's not, whether it's receiving the help that it needs, whether it's receiving the recognition as in it, clear focus on the work ultimately produces results. And by the time people are looking to latch on, we've already recorded a lot of successes. So thank you very much. And thank you very much for also that last minute travel plan that very few of us in the room are aware of. And just before I close, I also need to thank very much the AIF team who have also put this together at such short notice, and specifically Fernando Berdrama, who was instrumental in the conceptualizing of this Bankability series and ensuring that this is the first of its kind, and that it's going to continue, and we'll have a lot more dialogue at different fora. So thank you, everyone. And the questions don't stop, by the way. We have an email address. We have various forms of reaching out so that we continue the conversation. AIF is never going to get tired. It might take a little time, but we'll answer you. Thank you very much.